Hey, hello everyone. It's Chris here. I must say, the last few episodes, I really had a lot of problems with cameras. I tried three different ones, and every time you have to redo things, it gets more and more frustrating. But anyway, let's see how this works. Today, we want to talk about Codename Annika. And Annika is a really interesting book because it's where the spies actually use conventional weapons in their operations. Now, of course, you would know about the old cloak and dagger, and perhaps you know a pistol or explosives, things like that, calling in airstrikes, that type of thing. Yeah, that's common, man. But to actually go out and use conventional weapons against an enemy the conventional way is really unique. It doesn't happen that often, but it can, of course. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book. Now, Anika, just to be sure that you follow the time sequence here, I actually do follow upon another book or books. But as I always say to you, every book is a book on its own. You don't need to read all the books. But they do follow on each other. So even though every book is a complete story, it's also so that if you want to know then what actually happened further, you have to go and read the next book. It wasn't written like that to make money. It was simply written like that because the books are quite long. You're talking about 480-page books. So if I have to combine four books into one, you're talking about 2,000 pages or 1,800 pages book, which is just, who's going to read that? It's just simply not possible. So anyway, the story starts with Codename Phantom, which I spoke about before. And basically what Codename Phantom is about is there's some dissidents in Zimbabwe. Every book needs a villain, and we have Zimbabwe, and we have a baboon, Robert Mugabe. It's an insult to baboons, I know, I apologize often. But the man was Jesuit trained, and though he started out quite well, he just screwed up his country completely. I mean, there's nothing left of Zimbabwe. It's a failed state totally, and it's run in the same way as what North Korea would be run. They don't even have a currency left. That's how bad it is there. It's pathetic. This was a country which used to work well when it was still called Rhodesia. And then, of course, came Zimbabwe. And yeah, the sad thing is Zimbabweans are wonderful people. They're educated, they are wonderful, they are good workers, they're just good people. They don't deserve this nonsense which the baboon brought to them. But anyway, that's what happened. And it's also a country which is totally in the sphere of the Chinese. It is not an American sympathetic country at all. We saw that with the last election a few years ago where the American candidate didn't even get close. How fair was the elections? Well, fair enough. Meaning that it's like the old Soviet elections. The only question is, are we going to win by 99% or 98% or perhaps 100%? That's how it is. But anyway, in the book anyway, some dissidents may decide that they want to start a revolt against this revolting figure. And so they asked Angelique Dawson, our heroine, for assistance, and she says yes, she will help them. So now she needs a lot of weapons to supply to them. Now, luckily, that country still operates in the 1970s. So whatever South Africa has discarded as old and obsolete, they want. And they are well trained. I actually, as I say in many books, I actually have great admiration for Zimbabwean people as well as the Zimbabwean Defence Force, which kept many of the Rhodesian traditions. And also I have a great amount of respect for the intelligence services, CIO, or Central Intelligence Organization, which nobody has heard about. But history didn't actually stop when Rhodesia became Zimbabwe, by the way. Not at all. So they're still operating, and they were running two death squads in South Africa, taking out dissidents. So I spoke about that in the books as well. And Angelique found a very interesting way of how she will get hold of the weapons send it over to Zimbabwe. But this codename Phantom, it also deals with what we call red cell operations, where special forces or intelligence operatives or both of them actually decide they're going to attack one of their own bases to see if they can penetrate and cause harm. Sabotage groups, yeah, well, they almost always succeed, because the country is not on a war footing at all. It's actually very lax. Having said that, don't believe every shite you see on TikTok. I've been at a place like Tempe military base. I've been at places like Special Forces headquarters, where I made actually lots of videos for us. And I can tell you, I'll testify what I found there was utter professionalism. So people are quick to judge and quick to, point fingers, but whatever, but it's your right to do that. But that's not to say you're correct. It's not the experience which I've seen. So anyway, that is codename Phantom, and then came codename Mel's Choice, because now that once Angelique's got the weapon, she needs to get it into Zimbabwe. So with Mel's Choice, and I spoke about Mel's Choice also, she actually has two aircrafts. She has a C-130, which is painted in Rhodesian camo. That's part of a PSYOPS operation. And she's got I think it is painted black, C-47 or Dakota. And she's flying these clandestine missions into the country. Something goes wrong with the C-130, it can't take off. So she takes the C-47 and she's almost, well, I don't want to use the word shot down, but she had to make an emergency landing quite soon after and go on the run. And of course, she's quite angry about that because she was betrayed. But I don't want to give a book away completely, As I say, some people say to me, because once you've spoken to us, we don't need to read the book. Well, you're actually wrong. Totally wrong, because you're talking about 400 or 500 pages books. So in other words, the hour which you listen to me talking about the book is really not going to give you a lot of details. It will highlight things for you, but will not be detailed. So anyway, to make a long story short about that, then comes codename Halloween 38, which we also spoke about. It's a PSYOPS book. In other words, part of a revenge action for having not been shot down. It's a bit of an internal joke. You don't say to the real Angelique over wanting the book that she ever got shot down because she will react. It's to her the ultimate thing to be shot down. But the fact of the matter is, actually, in quite a few books, she has to eject or do emergency landings when things go wrong. She blames Foxtrot, later her husband. At this stage, is still a bodyguard and chief agent. The two's in love. It's very complicated because he is a senior officer and it's frowned upon. Many of you listening here would have served in the militaries and other places. And you know that it just don't happen. You don't get a senior officer falling in love with one of the people. It just doesn't work. It's frowned upon, especially in that world. So they have to keep it secret. So there's a lot of interaction between them, the entire series is actually the love story between the two of them. And it's quite endearing. It's endearing once you understand them. So I always say, why they didn't just grab each other right in the beginning, I don't know. When I wrote the first book, I didn't know there's going to be 54 books. So in the beginning, the first books, by which I mean from book 6 onwards, codename Foxtrot, which you know by now is actually the first book of a series in time, not codename BFO 565 and the rest, up to book 6, which is actually the last book, even it was written first. I've explained that many times, I'm not going to do it again. But there you will see there's a bit of a love-hate relationship actually between the two. They're very wary of each other. They're circling each other at that stage. Both are married to other people and they're happily married, but once their spouses die, that's when the doors actually open for them to carry on. And so it is a love story. He always worries about her because she's taking risks which she shouldn't be taking. She shouldn't even be in the field. She's way too senior to do this type of work. But that's Angelique, she wants to be involved. She is involved, and there's no way in the world you're going to tell her to sit in an office. She will get very, very obnoxious if you do that. So anyway, in Halloween, she actually ambushed these people who ambushed her. She knows she's actually flying into a trap. And what she does is she counter-ambush them. She gets the special forces teams around this ambush site, or where she's going to drop the weapons, as if she doesn't know she's flying into a trap. She's using a Super Freelon helicopter painted the same as the Chinese ones. In the previous books like Mel's Choice, I do reveal to you the existence of a big military base in southern Zimbabwe at Maringwe. And I explained to you why it's there. That's why the book was actually written. And in Halloween, she starts copying them as if she is the Chinese, who turned now on the baboon. And she's also using people who can speak very well English, and Shona and Matabele. And she's just broadcasting these messages that they're coming for them as if the Rhodesians are coming back. All designed to really screw up this baboon's mind. And when she is ambushed, when she arrives at the site, that's his code name Halloween 38, they do a shootout does take place. A huge contact ensues. And because she's got the people in place with a heavy mortar, she bombs the hell out of them. Then she picks up special forces teams and she moves out, but she leaves one behind. She leaves a 3-man or 4-man team behind. Now, that is not totally unheard of, especially in the espionage world. And that's where the US and NATO totally fail. They can't do this. They don't have a capability and capacity to do this. They just can't. They're not good enough because they don't fit in. And they don't have a network, so they have to rely on locals and they have to rely on Israeli intelligence in the Middle East to assist them. But normally when you see a bombing wrong took place or an attack, whether it be from aircraft or from whatever, it doesn't matter, an explosion took place. Even a plain old murder, many times you would see, always, you'll see the crowds standing around these places. Now, it's very, very possible that inside that crowd you will find operators who is actually there to observe. And they want to see what damage was done, they want to see who was killed. Sometimes they might even disguise themselves as medics, try to get a blood sample or something to do with DNA thing. And that's why they're effective, and that is why it's shame poor NATO, they just bomb me, and then they look at the pictures afterwards and they listen in on the hospital records, and they have to rely on local intelligence like the Israelis to feed them whatever mushrooms they feed them. And from there, they do their bomb assessments, about their damage assessments, and from there on come the press releases, and that's why they look so stupid. Because 96.2% of the time they actually kill the wrong person. Yeah, we talk about that. It was under Obama's regime, where you actually had this the statistic. It's true. 96.2% of the time they drone the wrong person. Yeah. Wonderful way to start new terrorism. Wonderful. It's just fantastically bad. You cannot believe it. If any other country in the world has been killing the wrong people like that, and I don't see them getting away with it. It's amazing. The double standards in the world is absolutely fantastically amazing once you know these things. And the problem is, of course, as I said, it causes more terrorism. That is why Hamas will never disappear. That's why Hezbollah will never disappear. That's why Al-Qaeda, ISIS, these people will never disappear. Why not? Every time you kill the wrong person and you kill hundreds of them, well, I would say tens of thousands by this time, hundreds of thousands probably, where you kill innocents, what do you think is going to happen? Yeah, it's not hard to figure out, is it? Just start using your brain. Not difficult. Mind you, it is a bit difficult for the US. I always have a slide which I put in here which will show you that About half of a country, but you can make it more than that, and this is on purpose. It's not by chance. About half that country cannot even read above a level of a standard 6 child, or words grade 8. Oh, shame. So, in other words, you have no understanding. You can't even really read my books because you're too stupid to actually understand what I'm writing. And these are not my statistics. It's not me sitting here insulting you. No, no, that is your own statistics. I have them. These are done by the scientists, scientific studies. And so these are the smart people. So it's only 2% of you can actually understand what I'm telling you. That's why you have basically not a democracy there, even though you would say you never were. You say you're a republic or something. You come with these names. You don't know what you're talking about. But the fact of the matter is you do have voting. And yes, it's interesting who always wins, isn't it? Very interesting because you always end up with a John McCain. How weird is that? But this all traces back to being the second beast of the Bible, and there you have to read Hope of Evil, the war on Protestantism, which I've now mentioned after 16 minutes in this video. Yeah, I know I mention it in every single book, man, but it is important because that explains to you that this was not done by chance. Somebody sat us out there, some Jesuit, and somebody said, well, let's make the American people very stupid. How will we do that? Well, let's take over the school system. We make sure they can't read properly, like in the Middle Ages. We're going back there now. That's exactly what's happening. And then, you know what? We also feed them a lot of food, which will make them even more stupid. Highly processed food, things like that. Then, of course, we try to make the economy so bad that the middle class starts shrinking, that they're suffering. Then we make them more into dependable on the state. Yeah, there you go. Fascism, once again. And then, if that doesn't work, we play a Hegelian dialectic on there. And that is where we start robbing the different parties, the hillbillies, far right, conservative. And then you have the wokeism, the liberals, Takara this side, Obama versus something like Trump, and both sit at the same table. The Bible says so. They look like real enemies. They're not. Nah, not at all. See how nice they are to each other afterwards. Lock her up. Lock her up. Yeah, nothing happened. No. Hilarious is still not locked up. No. Yeah. Joe Biden, yeah, gets cancer. Well, he had it all the time, but he gets cancer. Oh, we wish him well. No problem. Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? You would have expected these people to just go out and take revenge, man. No, we don't. No. Always a small man somewhere, some middle level, perhaps senior level, but not important guy. Nice fancy title. Yeah, they always the ones who ends up somewhere in a prison, and then he's pardoned afterwards, and then the population is happy again. They can watch the Super Bowl, man. Yeah. Yeah, it's not by chance, guys. These things actually do happen, and if you read Hope of Evil, you will actually be able to see the patterns. And once you can see the patterns, it will bring you a lot of joy, because then you know you're in the end times, and this shite is not going to go on very much longer anymore. But anyway, in the book, in Codename Honeycup, this team which was left behind is now observing what's happening there. Of course, the Zim army arrives. They want to check out what happened there. They suffered massive losses. And of course, they are seriously angry, and they started tracking. They start seeing what's going on. And so this team deliberately then gets spotted. And so now they are on the run. Now, that's a very, very specific term, being on the run. OTR, all special forces practice that. In the dark phase of the South African Special Forces anyway, you will be on the run. In other words, you'll be dropped off somewhere, and then you have to run away. There's people who tries to capture you, and they're going to capture you at some stage because you're going to navigate yourself into an ambush. Once you do that, they're going to jump you. Yeah, if you read my friend or listen to my friend SW Forever, one Recce Sergeant Major, demolition expert, if you read his books, his book which we wrote, 10 years in South African Special Forces, and you listen to his series where he talks about these things on Legacy Conversation, which is our main channel, where we speak to military vets and policemen, things like that. He will tell you about one incident which I also described in the books. I just copied it from him, but it happened more than once. Where a guy walks into an ambush and the instructors, wearing night vision, they just jump in. And one hell of a fight breaks out between the three of them. At the end of the day, as SVS says, they can't believe that this recruit is using such foul language, showing no disrespect to his instructors. But they got the guy, they got him subdued, and then they got a bag over the head, handcuffed, cable tight, and they dragging him there to work with him. And when they removed the thing over his head, turns out they captured one of their own instructors. And the recruit was still running, he just broke off and he ran. So you have a right to defend yourself. You can swing back, but you're going to get caught and you're going to get interrogated, and there's a reason why they call that a dark phase, and many people actually struggle to get through it. They completely undress you, you're completely naked, you're sitting there might be female intelligence officers around making comments about your lack of manhood. They're gonna niggle you, they're gonna do whatever they can. I mean, it's hard, man. There's pictures of a poor lad sitting there, and it's just not easy. Not easy. And after a few days of no sleep, your brain will start playing tricks with you. That you start almost hallucinating, because if I keep you awake for 3 days, this is scientific facts, you will, for change of personality, the real you is going to come out, which is the entire point of selection. I want to see who you are. That's basically what it's about. And see if you can operate under such stressful conditions. So we'll go through it. And it's very fascinating that when you read these books about the Navy SEALs or anybody, even the South Africans, it's extremely seldom to never that they actually discuss that part of the training. And you can figure out why yourself. I don't want to reveal anything. But if you looked at my series about Auschwitz survival, I do go into it a little bit. If you haven't looked at it, I think it's about 8 hours long. It's about 8 episodes, or 7 of an hour each, which is really, really fascinating and basically comes out of the books, and also, of course, what I myself went through. So, so also air crew, of course, will also have this type of training, as well as special forces. Why? Because they're to be found behind enemy lines. So what most people don't realize is there's another group of people who's always behind enemy lines. It's your spies. And I'm using this terminology now as you would understand it. In fact, the spies themselves dislike intensely that word spy. They see that as the enemy. They themselves refer to themselves as intelligence officers or operators. They are not spies. Spies is a very ugly name. But most people understand what I mean when I say the word spy. It's also with agents. There's a total different meaning to this in that world. But I'm using it as in the sense of a common man, a common understanding of it. So if there is somebody sitting here who's a former intelligence officer or thing like that, don't get obnoxious of the way I speak. I know better, but I'm not speaking to you as such. I mean, you know already what you know. Most people don't know what you know. We have to understand that. It's as I always say in Legacy also, when we record people, I'm always asking, speak stupid. And by that, what I mean is, don't just take for granted somebody knows what's a C-130 Hercules, or what's a POM-Z or whatever. You know that because you were trained in that. You understand it. It's the lingua of the time. But for the people following you and other people, they don't necessarily understand what you mean. So it's better for you to explain more. It reflects better on you to do so. So anyway, this team is now Now, compromised, as they say, and now we're on the run, and they have about a company or two of a Zimbabwe army chasing them. And what Zimbabweans don't realize is that this is not by chance either. Angelique actually is planning this because she likes playing chess with people, and she does that often. And so basically, we're going to chase these people until they go into Mozambique, where they have every right to do. Under international law, there is something called hot pursuit operations. In other words, you're chasing a terrorist or a gang, they run across the border. You can go across the border. It's not an invasion, it's not an act of war, just to go and get those guys and get out again. But you can't stay there and you can't make a full scale invasion or something. That is an act of war, actually, when you do that. This is where you chase people down, you grab them, and you bring them back. That's not to say you can go and murder innocents, hello, like happening all the time. You still have to abide by the rules of war and, the rules of common decency, which I think most armies actually do. Until such time that they get into combat. And then, of course, it's a matter of survival, and you see your lack of fire discipline, and you just have to go shoot. You don't even know what's a double tap. You cannot produce weapons for the people you killed, so you plant weapons on them. Yeah, these stories are coming out from the elite units. I'm talking Australian SAS and the other Special Forces unit. Yeah, the Prime Minister had to actually apologize. Yeah, he did. Apologize to the Afghan people because they were committing murders. Yeah, they did. Why did they do it? They said, it comes out, they said that as Australian SAS, they felt inferior. Yeah. Why? Why would you have felt inferior to your mates in Britain or wherever? You guys are good. You don't need to feel that. It's pathetic. It's not an excuse which I can accept from you. Even though it's an honest one, I know where you're coming from. It's a colonial thing versus the master race in the UK, Why? Because you still bow down there to the Queen and the King. Why are you doing that? I don't get it. But anyway, you did. And so now it comes out that the British SAS was also committing the same old war crimes. Yeah. Of course, if I were doing that, I can mention the Green Berets, I can mention the SEALs. You know what, all of you. What does that mean to me? Low standards, very, very low standards. Not good enough. Sad to see that the demise of once good units, isn't it? But anyway, and to ambush these people, Angelique's got conventional assistance. She got hold of the G6, which is a cannon, which is mobile. It looks like a huge tank. It's got 6 wheels. I actually have pictures of it. I think I'll play it here in the background for you. And we also made 2 videos, very, very good videos, which is going to come out on Legacy Conversations about the G5 cannon, as well as the G6. And then also we're going to make I'll probably did by the time you see here, we're going to make another one about the rocket launch systems, like this Starlink organ, which fire all these missiles, or rockets rather. I can say missiles, not the Stalin organ, but the rest of them. The later ones actually do have guidance. In other words, they're not just blunt rockets. And we're going to talk about that, and that's the other thing she has. She has 2 Valkyrie MLRS, your multiple rocket launch systems. Now, these things are unique to South Africa, and if you look at the 2 videos which I'm talking about, which is Colonel Pierre Franken of 3 Battalion Support Group, so he became famous, as well as Major General Chris Bom Lobsher, and none of them know about these books, right? It's got nothing to do with them. They're not supporting the books, they're not doing anything like that, and I wouldn't ask them to do it anyway. But they did speak on legacy, and they were basically confirming the statistics and all the things which I'm quoting in the book for you. Why? Because I know actually what I'm talking about, and I do a lot of this research, and I've seen these things in action. And so I know what these things can do. It is fantastic weapon systems. But I wanted to introduce them to the world because I find that, especially when something is built in Africa, most of the rest of the world, they don't know, and they don't care because they got better. Yeah. We saw how good your weapon systems are in Ukraine, didn't we? Yeah. That shit is. I told you they are. Told you they're not gonna work. Yeah, I did. American military might debunked. Yeah, 2017 already. I wrote that book. It's astonishing. I wrote this entire series actually as a warning to tell you people to wake up, to up your standards, to understand you're not as great as you think you are. By the way, I'm not the one who said that. It was Golda Meir. She once said that in a cabinet meeting. You're not as great as you think you are. It was the Israeli Prime Minister, by the way, a fantastic woman. Really admire her. She also once said to him, I'm the only man in this cabinet. Golda Meir, man. I really liked her. She and Moshe Dayan, the one-eyed general. Fantastic people. It was a time when we had great respect for the Israeli military. But anyway, so she's got these weapon systems which I'm now introducing to a reader. And they describe in the book exactly how these things operate, how they work, what damage they can do. The idea is that the Special Forces team on the run comes into Mozambique, and then they go undercover. And once they go undercover, the shells and the rockets just rains down on this chasing force, and that's the end of that force. Now, guys, this is something which you can do in theory, and you can do during exercises, but it's dangerous. Man, it is dangerous, because if those guys on the run can't outrun up to a point because they want to be followed, the chasing force, of course, has helicopter support, then you've got huge problems, because they might be captured or killed. And then also they really need to get into cover before your shells and things arrive. And since these shells and rocket launchers are about 20, 25, 30 kilometers away from where the actual, call it the drop zone for the shells and the rockets is, the ambush site, you also have to coordinate this very, very well. And that is what comes out in the book, how the spies can actually call in these strikes and get it to decimate these people. So the first time this was actually exercised and actually spoken about, people just said, you're insane, you flip and use few words. It cannot be done, it is crazy, it's against doctrine, it just doesn't work. But in fact, during exercises, it turned out it can be done. And in this book, anyway, it is done. So that is Codename Annika. There's other interesting things in the books I just want to touch on quickly. Yeah, some of the other things which comes out in this book, and I use them in other books as well, because it's not a secret anymore. But many people don't know that actually the South African Special Forces and Army are using drones. Now, not in the same way of killing people like it's happening in Ukraine. I think that's a change in warfare. It's a total change. I also saw the other day, it's a few months ago now from what you see here, that the Chinese, with the artificial intelligence, and they're leading the world so far. Don't worry what Donald Trump and the rest are saying. They're talking shite. They're so far behind, they will never pick up. Is that they actually now have like a mothership, which is an aircraft which can launch a lot of drones in the air and then retrieve them. Just amazing. I think drone warfare has changed the world. It's almost like going back to Terminator, It's quite a scary idea. But in Africa, anyway, I think, well, we'll see what the future brings. But South Africa do actually have drones. And the ones they use with special forces in those days, anyway, were the Skylark 1. We also have a Skylark 2, and sometimes it has the letters LE behind it. This thing can actually go up to 15,000 feet. The wings are 10 feet wide. It's got a small propeller engine and a substantial pack of batteries, and then it's loaded with a lot of different homegrown electronics and very capable. And they would just beam them back, giving you about 16 miles range, 8 miles out and 8 miles back. And from about 12,000 feet, they say they will pick up a lot of things. But to spot a man, it has to go to about 5,000 feet. They're able to spot a man lying in the shade or darkness, doesn't matter, pick it up. And they can even mark this with a laser beam. And then, of course, once that laser beam is marking these people, a lot of things can actually happen to him. So quite often in the books, and especially this one, you see these people operating their drones. I thought you would find that quite interesting. Of course, we want to make an episode on Legacy as well, because we did use drones during the Bush War as well. There was a few of them tested out. One of the pilots actually speak about it. If I remember the video, I'll put it here. But we want to make an episode on it as well. Then the other thing we look at in the book is what happens after death. Here I have to explain to you that because of a love story between Foxtrot and Angelique, both of them actually have lost people to death. The real ones too, as did I. And it's logical when you lose your wife or your husband to death that you want to know what happens after. Now, if you go to the average church in South Africa and other places, they will always say to you, oh, well, he's in heaven now, she's in heaven. Yeah. So tell me, if she's in heaven, why does Jesus need to return? Why? Because he's returning to fetch his saints. He's returning to fetch the people who's in him, who believed in him and who have accepted him as their Lord and God and Savior. So why does he need to return? Does these people die again in heaven and go back in the grave? Huh? Stupid argument. Unbiblical, doesn't work. Totally idiotic. Doesn't work. No such thing. Of course, a lot of you will now point out to Lazarus. That was a story which Jesus told. Yes, it shouldn't be taken literally. And then, of course, if you're a Catholic, which is the first beast of a Bible, which I've explained so many times, especially in Oath of Evil and other books. And let me say again, I'm talking about the system, not talking about the individual here, except when you talk about the papacy or you talk about the Jesuits, and I talk about people. But the rest, no. But they have different beliefs. They actually seem to think that there's a hell and there's purgatory, and of course you go there. And then after death, doesn't matter if Jesus forgave you or the priest on earth forgave you, because, the priest on earth is so high and mighty in power that even God has to listen to him. Yeah, they say that, blasphemous, totally, but didn't the Bible say that this little horn, this first beast, will be a blasphemous one? Will say great things against the Lord? Yeah. Funny how the Bible is always correct. But anyway, so they have a different view that even though you're forgiven, you still have to pay for your sins. Totally unbiblical. You're either forgiven or not. Did God not say that when your sins is forgiven, it's as far away from the east as the west? Huh? In other words, he doesn't even remember what you've done because you're forgiven. Yeah, you're forgiven. But not these people. No, you're going to purgatory, man. Where you're going to burn a bit. And you know what? If only you on earth here, just pay me a little bit of money here to the church, then we will release some of our goodness here from the church, which of course we have nothing. But we'll release that, and things will go lighter on him. Perhaps he'll get a bit of water, this is your dad or your mom or your wife. Can you hear him crying there? Yeah, just put some money down, man. Just put, what's wrong with you? You're a horrible person. Why would you do that? And then afterwards, after they've now burnt there for a long time, they would actually go to heaven. Again, then why does Jesus need to come back? It's nonsense. Totally unbiblical. It's the same story with hell. that hell is actually there, and hell will you will go to hell and you'll end up there. The Muslims are quite proud of it. They have a system where they talk about, I think it's Surah 456, where they say, indeed, those who disbelieve in our verses, that's in the Quran. I'm one of them. I don't believe in the Quran. We will drive them into a fire. Yeah, that's hell. Every time their skins are roasted through, we will replace them with another skin, so that they may taste the punishment. Indeed, Allah is exalted in might and wise. Yeah, that's a loving God, isn't it? Huh? Burn forever. Huh? And to make sure you burn forever, you know what? We'll give you a new skin so you can start burning again. Yeah, that's loving, man. That's very loving. Of course, this is bullshit. You controverse what God says in Ezekiel 11:33, King James. Say unto them, as I live, says the Lord, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn from his way and live. Turn ye from your evil ways. For why will you die, O house of Israel? Who's the house of Israel? The Jews of today? No, that ended. That ended with the time of Stephen, when he got stoned. And Paul then took over, and he moved the Christian faith, those who believe in Jesus, onto the Goyen, which is people like you and me, who's not Jews, and we accept him. That's our Lord and Savior Jesus. Quite simple. I'm simplifying it for you. But then, of course, you have a chance of being saved, and you will be, but it moved away from the Jewish people, and it moved into the world, basically into the Goyen, the other people who then got a chance. That is where they stop being the chosen tribe. Now, people will, of course, say that is blasphemous in its own, but that's what the Bible actually says. So it moved over, and those people who believe in Jesus is the spiritual children of Abraham, or the house of Israel. You understand what I mean? It's spiritual. But anyway, so what really happens? If there's no purgatory and there's no hell for you to burn forever until Jesus arrives and you die again and go to the grave, what crap. Then what really happens? You know, it's interesting. There's Martin Luther, Professor Martin Luther, Dr. Luther, who started the Reformation. He came out of something which he called soul sleep. In other words, he looked at it and refers to where Jesus mentioned, but he's sleeping. And then they said, well, Lord, if he's sleeping, that's all right. He'll be okay. And he says, no, he's dead. He's dead. And so the words Jesus was using was sleeping. He was sleeping. And so that is where it comes from. A Reformation view of death is things go black. You go to sleep. You know nothing. The Bible says so. And because you know nothing, you cannot appear to your children here in the form of some kind of a ghost or some appearance or whatever. When you see those things, guess what? Fallen angels, that's what you're talking to. It's from Satan. In fact, it is totally forbidden to even pray to the dead. Hello, Catholic system? Why are you praying to Mary? Why? When Jesus said, and the Bible said, don't do that. Don't pray to the dead. They know nothing. Why do you do that? Yeah, we know. And, replacing Jesus, of course, Mary, the co-redemptor. Yeah. It's funny with these people, you know, the system, which is sun worship, is that they consider themselves above the Bible. Yeah, their traditions is above the Bible. I can put you their own quotes here. It's an oath of evil. So anyway, so our view, and it gave me a lot of, really a lot of hope. When you lost against, when you lost loved ones, you really want to know what happened, and then the Bible does give you the answers and a lot of hope. And I wouldn't call it joy, but it does give you support that you feel better about it. Is that they're sleeping, and since they're sleeping, they can be woken, and they will be woken if they were in Jesus when He comes in His second coming. And how will that play off? Well, that's also an oath of evil. He will not touch the ground. He will be hanging in the air. He will come with all His angels. He will be very mighty. Everybody will know He's coming. There's no way it's going to be in secret. He also warns, if I say to you, I'm there, or I'm in a desert, Don't go. Don't go. Every now and then you get some idiot who obviously has mental health issues, and he says, "No, I'm the new Jesus, man. I'm here." Yeah, really? Why are you on the ground? Bible says you shouldn't be on the ground. He will not touch it. No, no. Hanging in the air. Angels will then come and fetch those who was dead already, come out of their graves in the instant of an eye. So says Paul, you will change. You will have your new body, which cannot get ill. There will be no pain. Death, where's your angle? Where's that? Remember that? Remember that verse? Because he's overcome death, and you'll be changed, and you'll have a body. Not a spirit, not floating around. No, no, actual body. Also says you will be able to recognize each other. Exactly how that works, I don't know. I don't know how old my parents will be. How old will I be? They talk about angels bringing little babies and children who died back to their mothers. So there will be children there in heaven. And anyway, so then there will also be those who's in him will then was still alive. Hopefully it's all of us. Will also go up and will change in an instant. And go up and will go to heaven where mansions are prepared. Interesting, the new translations of the Bible talks about houses, not mansions. Isn't that interesting? But Jesus actually said mansions. So you'll be living there. You'll keep the Sabbath. Yeah, you'll keep the Sabbath, the fourth commandment. The 10 commandments will never disappear. It's the ceremonial laws which disappeared at the cross. People, always say, oh, the law disappeared. It's not there anymore. It was nailed on the cross. Yeah, grace defense. Yeah, what law? Which law? Because if you say to me that the law has disappeared and you mean the 10 commandments as well, my question to you always is, why don't you go and rape your neighbor? Yeah? Why? Why not? Why? Go and kill somebody, man. There's no law anymore. Huh? Huh? No, of course there's a law. Of course there's a law. 10 commandments will never change. What does it say in the last verse of the Bible? Don't change my word. What does Jesus say? If you love me, obey my commandments. Well, how simple is that? There's nothing to it, is it? Obey my commandments as far as you can. Because of course we cannot, because we're born in sin. But we try. And when we fail, we ask for forgiveness from God, not from a priest. Really? Priest can forgive your sin? Really? And then God has to listen to him. Huh? Because some village priest said, you're forgiven now. You know why I'm forgiven? No, I paid, I bought you a new car. Yeah. Now I'm forgiven for my sins. You think God's going to accept that apology, that forgiveness? You think he's going to say it's okay? Really? You think that? Anyway, so there's nothing to fear of death. They also say it's going to be very quick. I mean, it goes black. You know nothing, so it might even 10 years go past, 1,000 years might go past. You open your eyes and there's Jesus. You go up, you spend 1,000 years in heaven. That's 1,000 years which is in heaven. It's not on earth, because the earth will be left desolate. And those who didn't make it, who are still alive, yeah, you'll be running to the mountains, you'll be cursing, you'll be crying, there'll be a clash of teeth. But you die. You're going to die. You're not going to make it. And then 1,000 years later, the city of Jerusalem from heaven was big. It's about as big as Texas, in the form of a cube, as far as we know from the Bible. All of these things is from Oath of Evil, by the way. Then it comes down, and Jesus is there with it, touch actually the earth, where Jerusalem is round about now. Then it will be surrounded, because all of these evil ones will now be resurrected. And they will all gather with Satan. There will be more than you can ever imagine. And they will then surround the city, this holy city, and they will try to destroy it. And then the saints inside, hopefully all of us, will come walking out singing. And guess what will happen then? Fire will come from heaven, and it will devour, and it will kill those who rejected Jesus, all of them, quick death. Except perhaps for people like Satan and his fallen angels and those who crucified Jesus. Yeah, they will burn a bit longer, but still a quick death. And they will be no more. They'll be gone. No chance, no second chance, nothing. You either accept Jesus now or you're gone. Anyway, that is the the view of a Protestant faith comes directly from a Seventh-day Adventist, which of course I am. But whether you are a Seventh-day Adventist or not, it's still a Protestant church. And it is the biggest Protestant church in the world, by the way. It's not a sect. No. Jesuit order is a sect. I prove it in Oath of Evil. And so that's it. So in the books, I do write these type of things to give people hope, simply because I know there's a lot of you who've lost loved ones. I know how it feels. Twice I had to bury a wife, and I know how it feels, and I don't want you to go through the same emotions I went through. There's hope after death, but only if you accept Jesus. Lots of people don't want to hear this. Of course, they get extremely angry. That's fine. I don't care. There's something else, two things I need to speak to you still about. It comes out in this book, named Annika. Since we are quite on a serious subject here with death, there's a bit of a joke which comes out in Annika. I want to tell you about it. It was during the Battle of Gettysburg, and this actually happened. Remember what I say to you, whenever you read history in the books of a character starts speaking, like I just spoke about death, you can really take for granted almost they know what they're talking about. It's researched, it's there, go and look for yourself, do research. I'm not scared of anybody researching my books. I invite you to do so. But anyway, at the Battle of Gettysburg, there was a Confederate Brigadier General called James J. Archer. Now, you have to understand something. The US military wasn't always as bloated and as horrible as they are now. In fact, during the Civil War years and up to about the Second World War, they were very small, and they were relying on militias actually to assist them in a time of war. So they had a small cadre of officers, and then the regiments and things across spread around as a militia. They were not as bloated and professional soldiers, in brackets, as they claim to be today, and they certainly are not. So all the officers mostly knew each other, especially those who attended West Point or were at, the Naval Academy, places like that. They all knew each other. And then, of course, came the Civil War, and they had to choose. They're going to stay in the Union, or are they going to go with their states? Now, I really studied the Civil War. It's a fantastic thing to study. It is wonderful to read. And it's a great pity to myself that I'm banned in that country, because I would have loved to go and look at all their memorials and battlefields. And one thing which I have to give the Americans credit, they really know how to put up a good show of these things. And so you can actually visit Gettysburg, you can see everything can play off in front of you. It is fantastic to do that. But you can do it in South Africa too with our wars. And there are, of course, a lot of tours now out to Angola as well. But I found the Civil War fantastic. So anyway, this James J. Archer got captured, and he was brought to the Union Brigadier General Abner Doubleday. Now, Doubleday, they say, is actually the guy who invented baseball in the US. It's not really true. It's a myth, but that's what he's famous for. He also had a very interesting war, because when the war started at Fort Sumter, officially, there were skirmishes beforehand, raids, to free the slaves, things like that. But anyway, he was the second in command there at Fort Sumter, where the war really started. When the first cannon shot started raining down from the Confederacy, and that started the war. So he meets up with Doubleday. Now, the two of them know each other well. We're almost friends, they were together at the military academy, they served together. And so we greeted him very friendly. He says, "Hey, good morning, Archer. How are you? I'm glad to see you." They were very gentleman type of, like these American Civil War people. Really, really nice. But Archer himself, now he's lost about 400 men of his 1,200 men brigade within 2 hours. And he's also the first general officer to be captured there at Gettysburg. And he just replied, "Well, I'm not glad to see you by a damn sight, Doubleday." Yeah, you have to laugh at this. Shame Archer, when He died, he was released in 1864 and then he died soon after, Broken Man. And Doubleday went on to become quite famous. Such is life, it just shows you. Anyway, with that joke, let's get serious again. The Morgenthau Plan. Now, there was a US Secretary of Treasury called Henry Morgenthau. And he had this plan that he's going to disarm Germany. This is Nazi Germany. He's going to make it into a, well, it's not going to have any industry. So in other words, its capacity to make war would be totally removed from it. So it will go back to the Middle Ages. It can plow, it can grow food, but that's it. No, nothing else. Must be a farming community. So in other words, all the factories and industries were to be destroyed and kept destroyed for always. No engineering of any kind except for farming. So the universities would not be allowed to train anybody. And of course, if it worked out, you would not have seen today BMW, Mercedes, Volkswagen, Porsche, whatever. You would not have seen any of these vehicles or any of the German industry, which is anyway now ruined and wrecked since Nord Stream. Yeah, what do you know? Germans are really stupid these days. Yeah, your economy is going to fold anyway. We're glad you're not in Germany or in Europe. Your chances of being attacked there by a jihadi who came to the country legally. Thank you, Angela Merkel. Great of you. Yeah, we're going to attack you. You know what's also interesting is that it's mostly the second generation who attacks in the US anyway. Why? Why is it so that a guy escape his country, go to the US, being accepted there, and then his children starts killing you? Why is that? Why? Because, yeah, there's many reasons. You actually have to read the books. They get upset with the US. They see their parents have not actually made it as much as they could have. They also see that there's a lot of discrimination against them because they don't look like you, meaning they're not white. So they feel for some reason discriminated, then they get angry. And so they go and commit these offenses. Go and look at it. Look at the statistics. Of course, no one will tell you these things. It's probably hate speech, which of course it's not. It's interesting. You should know this. But anyway, interesting enough is this arch liar, as I call him, Winston Churchill. I really should make an episode on him. You know, the guy was nothing special. Why people are so impressed with Winston Churchill, I fail to understand, man. He's an idiot. He's a war criminal. He's a guy who would have been hanged if Britain has lost the war. He's a guy who went to cabinet meetings drunk. And the third cabinet meeting, he wanted to drop poison gas on Tokyo. Yeah, these things happened. Yeah, he's the guy who bombed the French fleet at Mers El Kabir. Yeah, you remember that? And then also, the French of that time, of course, was neutral. It was after the 1940 armistice. About 1,100 French soldiers died. The French Air Force then bombed Gibraltar. But since they are good people, the French, they actually bombed the harbour entrance. Made sure their bombs dropped not on the ships or anything, but in the harbour entrance. There were more than 46 such clashes. So you can say to me, oh, why is that important? Let me explain something to you. The only thing which kept the German army away, the Nazi army out of England, was the English Channel. What do they call it these days? I don't know. I remember Elon Musk or somebody wanted to change the name. European Channel? I don't know. Whatever. And if they have landed, if they've come over, because the Brits ran away with all their weapons left behind. Everyone, yeah, they even left their rifles, man, most of it. They ran away. Yeah, they ran. Dunkirk, other places, I think Cherbourg, they ran from there as well. Yeah. It was the French army who protected you while you ran away. Yeah. Do you know that the French army, the French military suffered more losses in that 6 weeks of protecting your little asses while you were running away? They suffered more losses than you suffered as the British military in the entire war. Yeah. Read Codename Caribbean. I explained this to you there. But should it have happened that France actually then, because of this idiotic attack on the French fleet at Mers El Kabir, if Vichy France then joined, and they seriously considered it, Nazi Germany and Italy. The combined fleets of Italy, as well as the French fleet, which is powerful, as well as the German fleet, which wasn't that powerful, but those three fleets combined. Do you think it is possible that they might have destroyed the Royal Navy? Because there's a very, very good chance they could have done that. Yeah? Yeah. And if they've done that, do you think the German army would have been able to get over the English Channel? Yeah? Do you think it might have happened? It came damn close. But let me tell you, if they've come over, there's no way you could have survived it. Why do I say that? Go and read what people like Montgomery has to say about it. Go and read his books. Go and read his memoirs. Go and read what they wrote about him in the other books written about him. He's quite outspoken. If a German army came across that channel, you would have been speaking German again. But I forgot, your royals, they actually are German, are they not? They changed their names to Windsor. Isn't that 1917 or something? But they're actually German. Yeah, yeah. That's their first language. That's what they used to speak, by German. You don't know that. That's the problem with a guy like Winston Churchill. When his ideas work, it works well. But when he gets the wrong idea, very much like the Americans, I think it was Charles de Gaulle who said that you can trust the Americans to do the most foolish option there is. I think he said that about Vietnam. You can trust him to do that. Even Churchill said something that when the Americans get stuck in, and I'm just paraphrasing, it is fantastic as long as they actually follow the right route. In other words, as long as their objective is honorable, which it ain't many times. But anyway, Churchill, here we have to come up for him once again. He actually was totally against this idea. He refused it. He said he will never do that. He said that will bring a lot of problems to the post-war world. And he should be credited because he realized that only 60% of Germans can actually live off the land. The other 40% will die of hunger. And then what? If they don't have industry, they can't buy foreign food. And if they can't import food, they're not going to survive. It's the end of the German race. Now, Germany, of course, is the place where the Reformation really started. It did start at other places about 100 years before Martin Luther. We're thinking of Johann Hus, who was, I think, in Moravia, one of those places, which today is totally atheistic. Not by chance, once again, didn't happen by chance. But anyway, this Germany was destroyed twice in the last 100 years. Yeah. Think by chance? By chance? Really? Yeah. No, probably not. And they're really looking for trouble now with Russia as well, but let's leave that for another day. So this Morgan plan was actually a strategy to commit genocide by hunger. Yeah, that's what they wanted to do. And that, of course, is what some people say is what the Jewish state is doing to the Palestinians right now. I really don't want to get into that argument. It's not the time and place to describe it. Each man should be judged himself for that type of thing. But it's interesting that the Morgenthau plan actually wanted exactly that. It came down to 40% of the Germans being wiped out by hunger. And of course, we all know, because I described it in other books, about the system which Eisenhower and the Brits had introduced after the war to starve about 790,000 German soldiers, not SS, normal soldiers, to death in their camps, because they wouldn't allow the Red Cross there, because they refused to call them by law POWs. So they called them displaced enemy personnel, words like that. And when the Red Cross, after many months, actually gained access, they said it is awful. That's the words they were using. It was an abomination which was happening there, because under POW rules, you have to feed these people the same rations as your men are getting. But the American army and the allies decided they don't have food to do that. They're not going to do it. So they accepted the surrender, and these people went starved to death. Yeah. I think it is in code name Alphabet 32. I also will mention it in Voices War Crimes USA, by which I mean giving a voice to victims of Allied war crimes, of which there were so many. Yeah, yeah. You know, it's interesting in Germany, after the war, 1945 to 48, there was definitely starvation going on. You could buy a woman for, a tin of sugar or a tin of bully beef. You could buy a woman. Yeah. My question always is, I said this in other videos as well, if you're a God-fearing man and you are there, and there's a girl, there's a woman, or she's got a child or parents to take care of, and she needs food, and you come and you say to her, Ech, mein Lichtling. I'm trying to speak German now. Let me rather say it in French. Now let me stay in English. So you go and say, okay, honey, I tell you what, you open your legs for me, and I'll give you a tin of bully. You're a fucking rapist, man. That's all you are. Excuse my language, guys, but you know what? If you have any sense of decency, if you have anything of Jesus in you, you would never do such things. Never. So get off your damn high asses there in the US and everywhere else and talk about the wonderful generation of a Second World War. No, you committed war crimes, a lot of it. And this is one of them. If you had any damn honor in you, you would say to her, you know what, I'll give you a bully beef. No problem. Let me take care of you. And then if something develops and you find love, go for it. But you will not tell me under such circumstances it's not rape. I know the law. And I know what is rape and I know what is honor. And you ain't got it. It's the same as when you have all these movies like A Band of Brothers about paratroopers of a US army. Then they arrive there in the Berchtesgaden, Hitler's house, and they steal. Yes, they steal every single thing. Cutlery, pictures. Yes. Oh, they're so proud about their war trophies. Man, you're a thief. That's all you are. You're a thief. Nothing more. In my eyes. Am I wrong? You decide, guys. You decide. You tell me if I'm wrong or right. Remember, this is after the war. This is not where you shot somebody and you confiscate the weapons and now you trade, let's say, an AK-47 bayonet for some food for your men or whatever. You know, these things happen. Fully understandable. Did it myself. But it's a different matter when you start stealing and when you start abusing the local population. Yeah, it's a different matter at all. So anyway, Churchill was being asked to actually sign off on the Morgenthau plan. And he refused. And he kept on refusing. And at some stage he plucked his moor. And he said, look, do you want me? Well, let me give you his entire words for you. Because you have to understand where Churchill is standing now. Britain cannot feed itself. And this story of Lend-Lease being for free, no. They paid it off. Russia paid it off. Britain paid it off. They were paying till about 2008. So they were paying about 60 years, they were paying these loans back. Yeah, wasn't for free. No. Franklin Delano Roosevelt stayed out of that war to break the economies of all these countries. And then once he squeezed them totally dry, he came up with Lend-Lease. And then he said, well, you're going to repay us. Yeah. But different from Ukraine now, isn't it? Very different. Because this thing which Trump has with them about their minerals. Yeah, those minerals are actually in Russia, man. They're not in the port of Ukraine, which is left. Do you know these things? Trump, do you know these things? Did someone tell you this? No, probably not. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So they said to Churchill, basically, they say, look, you either sign off on the Morgenthau plan, or for all further aid to the UK will be stopped. Yeah, there you go. Who's the boss here? Who's the second beast? Who's telling you to do that? Who's bringing his views onto you? Who's saying to this great, what do you call it? This relationship, this special relationship you have with the US? Yeah, very special, huh? You're going to do what we tell you or we stop the aid. Yeah? And what happened then afterwards at Suez? What was it, 1956, I think? What did Eisenhower do to you? Stop your crap and come home. And what did you do? Oh, sorry, sir. Sorry, sir. Yeah, you stopped your crap and came home. Broke Anthony Eden. Yeah, yeah. Strange how interesting history links together. Isn't it fascinating? I love history. Love history, especially when you see more than what stands in the school books, history books. So we had Churchill by the shorts and the curlies, they had him in a vice grip there. And so he plucked his moor, and he was actually angry. He says, crossly, what do you want me to do? Get on my hind legs and beg like Fowler? Now, okay, what is Fowler? What did he mean by that? Now, Roosevelt actually had a little dog, a Scottish Terrier. And obviously, Churchill knew this dog. I mean, it would have been around the White House, because it's in the White House where he was quite often walking around naked. Yeah, very disturbing indeed, indeed. And that's also where he found out about the fall of the Brook. Yeah, it was quite a shock to him, shame. So that's what he would have seen the dog, and probably the dog was trying to, stand on his hind legs and beg for food. Yeah, can't stand such things, but anyway. He was not amused, Churchill. He was like, what must he do? I mean, Britain was bankrupt by that time. He had nothing left. But still, he stood up. He stood up for the Germans, for his enemies. And man, as long as I don't like Churchill. I'm quite honest. I think he's a shyster, which should be exposed. But you have to stand up for the man. He did the right thing here. But anyway, after that, he signed. Yeah, he signed. There you go. They broke him. They broke him. And I says what's shocking is for us today is when Roosevelt at that stage was a very ill man. He didn't even know about what he was signing. He said to Secretary of State Henry L. Stimson the following words, I have no idea how I even initialed this. So in other words, same as Biden. In other words, he was ill, and now you have some shysters there, and they just put a pen in his hand, or they use this, what do you call it, automatic pen or whatever. Yeah, you think that's democracy? You think that is how it should be? Yeah. I've got news for you if you think that's right. It really isn't. It is totally wrong. Because people forget, and I've worked with a few presidents from a legal viewpoint and other ways. They're just human beings, man. They're not great people. Most of them are not. I really admired Mr. Mandela. But the rest of them, please. But they're just human beings. They have off days, they have good days. They can get ill, things like that. It's just bad. Now, was the Morgan plan, was it actually implemented? Yes or no? Because the history books will tell you no, they dropped it. But the answer is yes. In a different format, it was definitely implemented. The UK, despite Churchill signing on it, never implemented it. Anthony Eden, the guy who got thrown out because of the Suez crisis, he got them out of it because he simply refused. So how did they implement this? Now let me explain again to you. Remember, I explained to you how they changed the wording from POW to displaced enemy personnel and things like that. And by doing that, they could starve almost 800,000 soldiers to death. And if you think about it, you don't starve somebody to death in 3 days. It takes a long damn time to starve somebody to death. It's a cruel death, it's a long death, it's a suffering death, it's torture. Well, once again, those camp guards walking around there and you see these people starving to death, and you don't care. You don't care. Oh, amazing, amazing, wonderful people, are we not? So up to 1947, this is now 2 years after the war ended, the Allied had a non-threatenation order going. And Harry S. Truman, who took over from Roosevelt, he said the following, take no steps looking towards the economic rehabilitation of Germany. And then in brackets, no steps designed to maintain or strengthen the German economy. I was an attorney and was a damn good one. Never lost a case. Why? Because I'm prepared. I don't have to explain to you what this is. What he basically ordered is, don't do anything to assist the German economy. What did the Morgan plan says? let's break the economy. Let's do nothing to help them to start manufacturing again, create jobs, become a nation again. No, no. This was let them die. That's what the Morgantown plan. Here it is. With those words, and I don't know why he said it. I don't know what was his aim to say it, but that's what he did. Practically, it stopped any economic assistance to Germany, which meant that how do you live? It's bombed out, it's gone. And you're occupied and you have to sell yourself for bread. So it's only then, after 1947, that it was only when death and hunger and disease became rampant in Germany, and the Cold War fear now started also with the Warsaw Pact on the other side. Of course, it didn't exist at that stage. NATO, by the way, came first. Yeah, hello? NATO was created, and then a few years later, Warsaw Pact. Yeah. People don't remember that. But anyway, the Soviet army was there on that side, and I'm not saying they were good people. We know about their crimes as well, and I'll tell you that. They defeated Nazi Germany, not the Allies. No, not you. You contributed, yes, very grateful. But you look at the statistics, you did very little, in fact, and you lost very few people too. Funny that. Anyway, that's only then that they came out with a Marshall Plan and they basically saved Germany. You talk about the Cold War. Do you know that the moment that the US actually obtained an atomic bomb, and of course we're the only nation ever to drop those atomic bombs on Japan, and I don't blame them for that. I think it was the right decision. As Reyes Truman says, you just need to stand there at the wreck of I think Ohio, one of the battleships which blew up in Pearl Harbor, to understand why he made that decision. But the fact of the matter is, by the time I got the atomic bomb, the US Army Air Force generals already identified something like 46 Russian targets. Yeah, this was while we were still allies. Yeah. Cannot do business with a beast, Cannot do business with a second beast. It's untrustworthy. Will break every agreement you sign with them. They will intervene in everything you do. They will interfere. It's untrustworthy people. The only thing you can trust them to do is what the Bible says they will do, which is implement the will of the first beast, which is the Catholic system, who gets its power from the dragon, which is Satan. They will implement that system across the world. Are we doing it right now? Yes. Absolutely. Go and read Oath of Evil. But anyway, there's another thing which we discuss here, but I'm not going to go into detail with it. Macadam Anika. That's the use of cluster ammunition, which is fantastic. It's effective. It works. If you can get it, the enemy in the open, that is not under cover, and you can get them with cluster ammunition, I'll do it anytime. I'll order the launch. I'll order the shooting. No problem. I'll do it. Why? Because it works. It works, man. But of course, when you start dropping cluster ammunition into built-up areas, like is happening in Ukraine, I think from a Ukrainian side, actually, they were the first ones to use this ammunition. Yeah. Where did they get it? US. Yeah, US. That's it. A lot of NATO countries, of course, sort of banned cluster ammunition, as they sort of banned landmines, especially anti-personnel ones. Yeah, well, not really. I still have it. It was, of course, the Brits who had atomic mines. You know about that. It's also in the books. When they planted atomic bombs, they would plant them in Germany. And then if the Soviet Union overran Germany, which they could have done easily, because the US never had, NATO never had air superiority in the 80s, read codename Blue Tank, then they would have detonated these things. But for once, the West Germans actually had some manhood, so they refused this. But in fact, it came out many years later as they had these plants and they had these bombs. And to keep the circuitry inside the bomb actually warm, they actually would put live chickens in it. And with the heat of the chickens, then of course it would counterbalance the frozen ground around them of Europe. And when this came out, they actually asked the guy who said it was from the government, they asked him something like, is this a joke? Really, live chickens inside a nuclear bomb to keep it warm? The secretary? He says, no, no, the British government doesn't make jokes. No. Yeah, he said that. It was actually funny. I feel sorry for the chickens, man. But what the hell's wrong with you people? Why would you even consider such things? It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. The double standards in the West is to me is amazing. Really, you look at these things, you can just shake your head. You can clearly see the pattern of a second beast and the unholiness and the satanic signals and signs and occultism. We really live in evil times. Anyway, that is Codename Annika. It's available hardcover, softcover, as well as Kindle, as well as audio. It's on Amazon. I will leave you the links. Thank you for listening here. I hope you find the book interesting. From that book comes, I believe, Codename Lucy, which we've spoken of before. And it's a really fascinating book. It's really interesting how this planned out and how it played out and how we introduced the weapon systems to the world. Got many letters from people who says, wow, they didn't know about it. And I'm really grateful that on Legacy now we can actually talk about those weapon systems. So the two channels always run together because many, many times, often actually what we say on Legacy is confirmed by the books, or the books have already written about what we said on Legacy. That gives me great joy. I say again, the people talking on Legacy doesn't even know about the books, so it is totally innocent from their part. So don't read anything which there isn't. And that's my story. God bless until we meet again.